Any other comments from the public? All right, we'll move on. Amendments to the agenda, David?
So we have a couple. We need to add an executive session regarding negotiations to the end, and once we end the session. And we also need to add, and I'm going to ask that maybe we put it right after 10, we do need to have an item regarding Vermont School Boards Association, Vermont School Boards Insurance Trust, and VHI regarding the annual meeting voting delegation application. Basically, the board needs to decide on who's going and who can vote on your behalf at that meeting. And they need to know before the 3rd. That's why, because our next meeting is the 4th. So
Okay.
that's why it's on there. So that would be like 10A if we could make it that.
All right. Anything else?
Nope.
All right. Just as an aside, do we know when we're going to get our student rep back?
I have not, and I did not find out. I thought she would be here tonight, but
All right.
we'll find out.
We'll,
I thought she was independent studying through the end of September. I really did. Yeah, and that's what
I knew she was traveling.
I thought she would.
We'll just do a
Yeah.
check-in with her.
Yep.
Yeah, I
Sounds
should have
good.
done that before, so. All right, we'll move on to agenda item 5, announcements.
So we have some. Obviously, we're heavily now engaged in the school year. Some quick things, a couple announcements by your place, but I'll just quickly go through them. We're up and running in full swing. We're currently got a lot going on in the buildings. Chamberlain School held their annual welcome assembly yesterday to welcome kindergartners to our school family. Each 5th grader was given a carnation to share with a kindergartner as a symbol of sincere welcome. Both Chamberlain and Orchard are participating in International Dot Day this week, an international celebration based on Peter Reynolds' book, The Dot, which invites each of us to explore their creativity and make our mark on the world. Orchard students have been engaged in Google Hangout as part of the celebration with students from all over, including Massachusetts, Kansas, London, during their library class time. At Rick Marcotte, they'll hold their annual Family Fun Day on September 23rd. This is an annual event to kick off the school year and build a strong community. At Tuttle, students have been engaging in a series of team activities intended to enhance learning and build relationships between members. Those intentional efforts have included field trips to Mount Philo, Shelburne Farms, again doing some of those activities. At the high school, students have been participating in a T-shirt design contest to build unity throughout the school. Additionally, this week, students have held meetings for some of the following clubs. I'm sure I'm forgetting some of them, but DECA Club, Coding Club, Speech Club, Robotics Club. The list is actually longer than that, but and I'm sure I'm forgetting a few. These meetings are just, again, for the first week. We know that there's many more that will be happening. And again, many students and staff, families have been taking advantage of the beautiful weather. Now I can say the beautiful weather. It's changed it just recently. So, again, a lot going on that's very positive. Thanks.
Great. Any other board announcements? All right, thanks. All right, we'll move on to agenda item 6, city and school collaboration.
So, Elizabeth, I'll just start. We don't have another meeting until September 22nd. That's, again, Elizabeth and I'll meet with the city manager and Helen Reilly, the chair of the city council. And we also have a steering committee that we'll need to talk about at that meeting and formalize our agenda. That steering committee will be, again, the 26th at 7 p.m. One thing I think is important to note is that we have had on a conversation, and I think has been in front of the board and the community, is this letter of intent on a land exchange at the Rick Marcotte property, about a 0.7 acre land swap or a desire for land to allow for the building of a city center. And that was moving ahead, we thought, quite fast, and the board had responded to and put some legal time into that. And as of current, that has been kind of taken off the table. So I think just important to note that one of our collaborations specifically with the city regarding that LOI has been put on hold. I don't know if you wanted to add any more than that, but
Um,
Just
Yeah,
to
go
clarify, that's been put on hold by the city.
correct,
As opposed to us. Yes, we didn't put it on hold.
very right.
And do you have, I don't know if you mentioned the library.
I did not. We, again, good point to bring up. We've also, and you've seen it in the other paper, the community has, that the city indicated to us shortly after the late summer that they wanted to move the library into looking at lease space. And from what I understand, although I've not had specific conversations at all on the specific arrangement on the lease, but it sounds like it's going to the University Mall. And they're looking at a November, December timeframe, and we're scrambling. We need to pull a committee of folks together to look at what is the circulation that will go with them, how are we going to fill that void. We've got all sorts of questions. So again, it's not that we continue to be good neighbors with the library. We're just trying to figure out what that means to our high school students, our middle school students who share and have shared the circulation of a lot of the contents that the city also owns there. So certainly
It
that's
sounds like also just the logistics of a move and some of the budgetary impacts too.
correct.
Anything else from the board? Good. Anything from the public on city-school collaboration? Yes.
Will that committee be residents of South Burlington, or is that specifically people from the school community as far as the work of separating the circulating items?
So the committee was really, it's just our use of pulling together a group of people that are city and school to discern what's yours, what's ours, and really work out kind of the plan, the timeline on how that's going to work. And for us to then internally understand what does that mean for us on what, if circulation is going to be minimized, how are we going to make up that for our students that might need that material? So the committee would really be kind of a city representative and school representatives to determine, what needs to be done. I want to say backwards plan, but we don't exactly know what the time is for departure out. So kind of working, from where we are today forward.
Yes.
Yes, so just curious, the flavor or the tone in the other paper made it sound like it was a cost-saving measure for the district, but it sounds to me like you were out in the dark a bit on this. Am I right?
Well, it's not a cost savings to the district. The city pays a lease for the space within the library.
Pays the school.
school district.
Some 5 times as much as they're paying the.
I think what I read was our lease is for about 64,000, and I think the U-Mall lease is maybe
45 is what I read.
yeah. So it's the difference between 45,000 and 64,000, I think. So that's
It's a typo in the other paper, thank you. The other paper said, yeah, very different.
oh
Very
okay.
different. Thank you, okay.
I did not catch that. Yeah. Yeah. It's not exactly a wash, but the school district did include the lease revenue in the budget that was approved by voters in June. So we will have a shortfall depending on how the timing works out and so forth.
Again, that's one of the things that we need to collaborate and connect with the city folks around how we work that out.
Good. Anything else? All right, we'll move on to agenda item 7, the superintendent's report.
So I have some items there, quite a few items actually, but I did include just some information on Act 85. I think I'd rather just let you kind of read through that at your own leisure and maybe come back with any questions that you might have. Again, John prepared this for me, but I would really encourage the board members, instead of me spending a lot of time, but really the intent of this was really to kind of understand some of the methodology behind what the AOE had to go through to construct that, and have that deeper understanding a little bit about that particular area, Act 85. So if that would be okay, I certainly would welcome your feedback. Next, I want to just jump into enrollment for a quick bit. Again, appreciate the board's decision last meeting to add a classroom teacher to both Chamberlain and to Orchard. What you have here is an update yet again as of 9/13 today in comparison to 9/1 when we last provided this. Most importantly, I want you to just look at the total numbers. And that's, we're seeing at Central School, I reported out 343, we're at 341 as of today. At Chamberlain, we were 247, we're at 246 currently. And Orchard, we're at 397, and we were at September 1st, we're 396 now. Looking at the other schools, again, pretty consistent, one down at middle, 556 to 555. And the high school, similarly, 940, 939. I'm inconsistent because at Chamberlain, we added another teacher in the summary, and I'd rather we had not done that because we have yet to hire the teacher. And in Orchard, I haven't added the teacher, and so I'm just trying to be consistent with the additions of the teacher. It's not consistent. Bottom line is, enrollment remains about the same place, and we're working to fill the positions in which you last approved through a process both at Chamberlain and at Orchard. Let me just pause for a second and if you have any questions specific to that. Okay, hearing none. Hiring status, we last spoke a little bit about where I'm at with the FTEs in total. From the last meeting, again last week, we're still in process of hiring those yet unfilled positions. I did not have a lot of time to circle back for you on some of your questions. I think the most important part of where you see variances or differences, and I want to be clear, I'm not getting your answers actually, but I want to be clear about where you see the differences. It is really student specific. So where we had student needs, we thought there's some fluidity between some of those FTEs moving from one school, particularly at the elementary, to another school. And so that's where you may see downs and ups. And so we will need to be watchful as we particularly fill those positions and or not fill those positions based on those student needs. So that's where I'm at with just giving a quick little snippet.
So can I clarify that, David? Is that the student moved between schools or that the student needs were reassessed? I don't quite understand that.
I think it could be both. It could be most likely what we find is there's a student moves
Okay.
to another school, to one of our other schools, and so then the resources need to follow the resource that was assigned to that particular student. And so that creates some confusion sometimes when you're looking at the FTE fluctuation. The Spirit Fund, and I've included just some information about the Spirit Fund in here. And the Spirit Fund was set up initially to help with money that came in to support the work. So the foundation was set up, and Martin, I know you probably can provide some additions to this, but what I provided is a little snippet on this fund. And so the South Burlington Foundation set up a Spirit Fund last spring as a way for parents and community members to donate funds to help support the transition to a new mascot and school nickname for our school district. The Spirit Fund raised a little over $5,000, which the foundation would like to transfer to the South Burlington Boosters to grant to appropriate athletic activities and teams and groups. And so the ask was that the boosters officially receive the funds, disperse the funds using an established process to distribute funds to students, athletics, and or student activities, use the funds for non-compete items in regards to the name change, etc. So essentially it's moving the funds from the foundation to the boosters through that process.
Can I add?
Yes, absolutely.
A few things. Just by way of background, because I think we actually took off our future agenda items, the South Burlington Foundation, to kind of cover it here. And I'll just very briefly mention that the South Burlington Foundation, School Foundation's been around for a while. It really hasn't been meeting very often. It's an organization. It's a
1C3.
1C3 organization. It's a place where people can contribute to particular campaigns that we have. Get a tax deduction as a charitable gift, and it can be used for items that we're not obligated to purchase under our budget. We can't really use the funds for textbooks, for instance. But it actually was used to fund the building of the field, the turf field, and other things as well. And it also deals with bringing in some money for scholarships. So in any event, for this particular effort, when we found out that we were not going to be able to have additional funds to assist us in moving to the new logo, we set up this fund that was specifically for individuals who had expressed interest in contributing to assist the school in changing from the Rebels name to, wasn't known at what it was going to be at that time, but now to Wolves. So I do understand that we did have a meeting of some members of the foundation, it included Patrick Burke and me, and decided that really we had different options. We could have tried to figure out ourselves how to use that money as it was designated to be used, but we decided to bring the boosters in to help us because they really are the ones who know where the needs are. And this is what the Spirit Fund is going to be used for. They did find things that it's going to be used for, and specifically we wanted it for helping to move to the new logo, to the new identity of South Burlington. So a Wolves mascot costume is being purchased with these funds. Wolves embroidered golf bags are being purchased. Wolves merchandise, that'd be t-shirts, sweatshirts, stickers, patches, etc., to be used as prizes for a new Wolves fan app being launched by the activities department. And then finally a Wolves breakaway banner for the cheer team. And all those items add up to a little bit over $5,000. So, and we think these are great, the foundation approved these as being great expenditures to help us move on to being South Burlington Wolves. So,
Thank you, Martin. Great. Lastly, I'd like to just give you an update on this Adidas product donation. And I think that's also important that you know that. So I'm just going to read a statement here that I've prepared. So last winter, high school principal Pat Burke and acting activities director Chris Langevin met with a local sporting goods store owner who had been contacted by representatives from Adidas Sporting Goods. Adidas, via the local business owner, offered to be supportive of the name change effort financially. The offer was in the form of free product and discounts on purchases, and included a memorandum of understanding regarding their support. At the time, it was unclear what the actual final unbudgeted cost associated with the change would be, and South Burlington administration decided to table the offer until such time that unfunded need became more clear. During this past summer, Adidas doubled their offer, and a second meeting was held with the local sporting goods representative, Mr. Burke, and our newly hired activities director, Mike Jabor. After this meeting, high school administration determined that the school district had in fact a number of unbudgeted items that made Adidas' new offer for discounts and free products worth pursuing. So the details of the offer were shared with the business office and reviewed by our legal counsel. Adidas representatives were able to address a few identified concerns, and the offer was accepted. In the end, Adidas agreed to provide a one-time upfront credit to our account of $20,000, and the district will receive a discount of 35% off everything we purchase. In addition, we will receive a cash rebate equal to 10% of our purchases. So in order to deliver on their support, Adidas had arranged for an account on a web store, which the South Burlington Athletic Department may use to order free Adidas product. Concerns raised about South Burlington using it exclusively Adidas gear were addressed satisfactorily by both Adidas rep and our local business. So again, I'm just giving you an update. Again, we're happy for the partnership assisting us in making the the change and helping us to defer the monetary need to do so. So again, I wanted to be clear with you on that.
And let me just also add, I'd be remiss if I didn't thank the contributors to the Spirit Fund. And
Yeah.
they will be getting letters thanking them from the foundation, but I also want to make sure they understand the board thanks them as well.
I have a question, David. So this agreement with Adidas sounds like it was brought to fruition with help from a local sports equipment dealer. I'd like to know, would it be all right if we announce who this was? Because we owe this person or this company a big thank you.
Well, I think it would be fine, and I think I can put that together for you and
Okay.
let them know who they are. There are more than one, and again, a lot of them are individuals that sell Adidas product.
Okay,
So certainly happy to do that.
thank you.
And is there a time period with this relationship?
There's a period spelled out for a length of time. I think it's 5 years,
Mhm.
and again, that also has the opportunity for us to either party at any time to end. So
And then just from I think I know the answer to this, but just from the board's financial policy, this doesn't meet any of the hurdles that would have required board approval.
Right, it does not. I did look at, I think 2.4, it's asset protection, I think, and so I think you're within that. You are, or I'm within that. It's not that you are, but I'm within
I
that.
think we're reviewing that tonight, so.
Yeah, it's actually 2.4 financial. We're doing 2.7 and 7, which is financial conditions and activities. And it is specific to, I can't make a single unbudgeted purchase or commitment greater than $25,000 or an addition of a .5 teacher. Again, I think that's not a great snippet. 2.4 is much larger than that, but I did look at that from that perspective as well.
Any other board questions or comments? Any questions or comments from the public? All right. Seeing none, we will move on to agenda item 8. This is board member communication and communication enhancement. And these are two items that were on our future agenda items for a while. I think the basic description of these really is around, one is sort of a restriction around board member communication, and the other is around potential enhancements or additions that would improve board communication with the community. So I'll leave it at that and invite any comments from board members.
I did include the social media one, just because we've recently done some work on that. Probably more prior to Alex and Steve, but maybe I don't have that right, but I know we did some work on that one.
Okay. Alex, you had a comment?
Well, sure, yeah. I'm the one that brought this up from future agenda items to present. And I think one of the reasons why I wanted to do that was I thought it would be, or at least I've received feedback almost ever since I've been on the board that people don't hear from the board when they send us a message. So, and I've been trying to dutifully respond with a very generic message, thank you for your input, and leave it at that. I don't think there's any harm in that. And I think some people have been saying that they're happy with that and that they're pleased that they've been heard. And they, at the same time, they say that, well, when nobody responds, they feel unheard. And my concern is that we're losing a chance to gain a lot of goodwill by not responding. And I think it would be worth it to talk about what are the ramifications when somebody clicks the link to send a message to the board, all 5 of us get it, plus David. Should we make it a practice, or at least perhaps something for a memorandum of understanding, I don't know, that we should respond with a thank you? And, and when we get questions, I think that's one thing where it's good to have the chair of the board respond to it, or have David, the superintendent, respond to it. But when someone comes to us and says, please do this, and these are my reasons, and we get a lot of really sincere, heartfelt, and well thought out messages. And I think it's good to acknowledge that people are paying attention and that they're relying on us to listen to them. And when we don't respond to them, it kind of breaks that chain of communication. Even though we do get all the messages and we read them, and they don't go into a void in cyberspace or anything like that. So that's something that I'd like to talk about. That was my reason for wanting to bring this up. I don't know, does anybody have any thoughts about on that?
Well, I know one of the challenges is, the practice has been I try to respond to specific inquiries as
Right.
the chair. And the challenge historically has been, I would have to send my response through David to copy to the rest of the board to avoid open meeting law issues. And the solution we've come up with there is a blind copy to board members so that you can't start interacting with the conversation, and it would by default become an open meeting if a quorum of board members sort of looked like they were having a conversation through email. So that's one hurdle I think we've overcome. One board member's ability is somewhat time limited to respond sometimes, but I think for the most part, I've tried to get something out, or at least offer to have a conversation with people as the board chair. That might be something during particularly busy times. We might want to delegate some coverage on that. But the other guardrail we have, aside from open meeting, is that we have no authority as individuals, so we operate as a board in a convened body. So for a single board member to sort of represent in a communication a position of the board is inaccurate in terms of how we function, and that is also a challenge. So in terms of communicating, and maybe we should consider, when I think about what you're asking, at least acknowledgement that the board received the communication, and also maybe some disclaimer, the way a lot of the school emails have, like FERPA and
Yep.
violate or guidelines, maybe something that highlights some guardrails the board has in responding with a level of specificity. But those are just sort of two thoughts off the top of my head. Anybody else?
No, I mean, I agree. I mean, we happen to be in a period where we're getting more emails than usual. So, and it's a matter of trying to delegate and make sure things are being followed up when it comes to emails. And I know there's a comment place that people can leave comments, including to the board on the website, but that's the administration handles any responses to that. And I guess it's a question of if that should change. The big issue is if something is falling through the cracks. And I think that with that, other board members can help out because we do now BCC responses to the other board members. And if you've noticed that something has been dropped or somebody's not been responded to, if you could flag it to Elizabeth to make sure that hasn't fallen through the cracks. Because I know when I've been delegated, it has happened where a message has fallen through the cracks. But it's just a matter, it wasn't intentional, and if a reminder from another board member would be helpful, certainly.
And there might be something where we establish, I think we have some guidelines internal to the school system, but it's sort of a minimum time frame. And practically speaking, I don't know what is reasonable, but kind of 48 hours might be something that we could collectively live with on that, and that we could also indicate that it's received. And I also think there maybe shouldn't be an expectation if it's a statement from somebody. I'm not sure there should be an expectation of anything more than we've received your email type comment.
Yeah.
Right.
As far as other enhancements, I just wanted to remind the board, we have a monthly article in the other paper. We haven't utilized Front Porch Forum too much, and that's, a little bit more limited in size, but that's out there as an option. we are maintaining the Facebook page from the budget period of time. And what are we calling that now, Bridget?
It's just South Burlington, it's SBSD School Board.
Okay.
So we had arranged the name to sort of match that at the outset. Anyway,
Yeah.
we've changed the title on the page now to just reflect that because it's broader than the budget, obviously.
And then the district website would be the other area that we routinely use. Are there any other venues that we've heard from the community would be more timely or more accessible?
No, I mean, I think, the fact that RETN, that we have them in, recording all of our meetings, and now the Facebook Live is a new aspect, which I understand tonight is the first time that that's happening. I've gotten half a dozen texts from people watching. I'm just kidding. I've gotten one. So I think that's important. We could go to other new social media, but frankly, I'm not real interested in having a Twitter account. And that's probably even old-fashioned at this time.
Mm-hmm.
We could start a Snapchat. Snapchat from the board meetings would be fun.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the other thing, just to clarify, is there are no district resources supporting any board communications. So when the public sees anything published by the board, it came from one of the five of us with some feedback of rough drafts and so forth from the board. So that's kind of on top of whatever else may be going on in our daily lives.
Yeah, and I mean, and unfortunately, there was in the budget for the administration to have somebody help with communications, which I was looking forward to working with for board communications, but that was one of the things that had to get cut to get the budget passed. So,
The only thing I would point out as an opportunity is that on the back of our agendas, we put public comments, and we've tried to outline kind of, this is more while you're present, but maybe there's another category, if you will, that is public comment and enhancements or something, where you can go, where you can see. Maybe we could spell out a little bit more.
Where
RETN.
the other places.
Yeah, RETN, Facebook page, a lot of our school websites, et cetera. I mean, our websites in and of themselves are a wealth of information sometimes about what might be going on that could help people. And then, again, we could take up a little more of that space as a thought.
I mean,
Any other-
I think that generally speaking, the information is there. I mean, we have information on the Facebook page, we have information on the website. For people who are interested in actually going out and getting that information. The information that we're pushing out to people is through the other paper. I mean, it arrives at the people's door on Thursdays. But that doesn't mean we're gonna get people to necessarily read the parts that we have. So it's like, how else can we push information out? And I don't know that there is. I mean, there has to be some receptivity or seeking that information as well.
Well, I
And
think,
if there are-
the other component, though, is, and I think we got some of this feedback during budget season, was how do we solicit feedback? And obviously, we have meetings, and there's a lot of venues to contact the board,
Right.
too. But is there a gap in that component of interaction with the community?
Yeah, I mean, there's probably more that can be done, going to Rotary Club meetings, the South Burlington Business Association, PTO meetings and such. But I always remind ourselves that we are a volunteer board, and we're pretty busy as it is. So, nevertheless, I mean, we definitely try to do that in budget season. We get out to whoever we can talk to, we go and talk to, so.
Yeah, and another aspect might be how, for instance, during budget, we leverage the Citizens Financial Advisory Group. Are there other activities that the board might be engaged in that would be supported by some kind of citizens advisory group,
Mhm.
even if it was a real short-term interaction, for instance. That might be another opportunity.
Well, we did that with master planning and visioning,
yeah.
and for big items like that, we certainly could.
And then on the first one on restrictions, I know, not to pick on you, Alex, but
Sure.
one of these came up in terms of, or the issue on a restriction around use of school-based email. And I think we had that discussion, and it's covered under board conduct, and I forget the other policy it's covered under, code of conduct, I believe. And from an access standpoint, no individual board member really has access to any unique listservs or anything from
Right.
that standpoint.
Right.
How about comments from the public on communication enhancement? Yes.
So there is an automatic response when you send an email, but you're talking about a more personalized, specific response?
I think we're talking about that a board member has a response, even if it's really just a comment.
I just think you all do an amazing job. You are volunteer. I appreciate the automatic response because at least it lets us know that it went through. But, thank you.
Thanks. All
One
right.
question.
Elizabeth?
Oh, yep, sorry.
One more question. Go ahead.
I don't know if I'm.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see.
Rethinking whether this is a good idea or not. Never mind.
Talk offline sometime.
I'm just going to say thank you for that. You censored yourself.
For exercising that judgment, whatever that was.
All right, we'll move on to agenda item 9, executive limitations policy monitoring. Both of these, 2.7 and 2.1, are warned for action. So David, do you want to?
So these are
through?
continued, and so just for the public, the first one is asset protection, which is, these are our monitoring reports. This one's specific to asset protection. I'm going to ask John just to walk through it. This is a lengthy a monitoring report, obviously because it's asset protection. I think I'd ask maybe, John, you just do a quick summary of maybe each, soliciting feedback from board members if you have questions, and then we'll go on to the next one, or allow you to do the monitoring.
There's 11 subsets to this particular one. The hallmark one, I would say, is the first one, where you kind of set the stage for what this is all about. And it says, fail to insure against theft and casualty losses to at least 80% of our property value. So that means that we should and do put in place a whole raft of insurance policies, the standard commercial general liability policy, the property coverage, auto liability, school board legal liability, school violent events coverage, workers' comp, and cyber liability policy. We maintain that through VISBIT, who custom makes those policies for the use of school districts and covers, I think at this point, nearly all, if not all, the school districts in the state. So in terms of insurance, we are well covered. The second one talks about not allowing unbonded personnel access to material amounts of funds. That means we essentially insure people who handle cash through our insurance company. And again, we do that. The amount of cash that flows through the district is fairly small. Most of our money comes directly from the school district, from the city, and federal sources and state sources. But there is some cash that flows through our books. The detail policy 3 talks to subjecting facilities and equipment to improper wear or tear or insufficient maintenance. And what we've done here is listed the various service contracts that we use to make sure that all of our equipment is well maintained and covered should there be a breakdown. And we do occasionally have breakdowns, but they are few and far between because we try to keep on top of it. There was a comment last time about trying to get to a listing of equipment that may be reaching its useful life. And I did try to look into that in the past couple of weeks, but I didn't get very far in it. But I think I can get some more data on that for another version of this. Detail policy 4, unnecessarily expose the organization, its board, or staff to claims of liability. And the way we try to approach that is to be proactive about training people on what their obligations are, operating a good human resources department that worries about liabilities rising from employees, errors and omissions for insurance for the board, safety inspections through VISBIT to see where we might have liabilities and can correct them in advance of having a problem. Detail policy 5 tries to protect us against improper purchasing activities, and these kind of mirror the thresholds in state law that if we're purchasing for over $15,000, we need to get comparative prices from vendors. If it's over $75,000, we have to have a more stringent method, and we do those things. We have a purchasing system. We bring bids to the board for approval, and we take those responsibilities seriously. Number 6, fail to protect intellectual property, meaning we don't allow people to make copies of copyrighted materials. We protect the information that is in our computer systems, and that's described on pages 6 and 7. Policy 7, we don't want to receive, process, or disperse funds under controls that are insufficient to meet the board-appointed auditor's standards. So we do have an audit every year. An outside independent auditor comes in and reviews our financial statements and our procedures to make sure that we're controlling expenditures correctly. And generally, they're very happy with the way we're doing those things. There is a couple of exhibits in the back that shows that we meet generally accepted accounting principles and do all the things we're supposed to in that regard. Detail policy 8, we're not to compromise the independence of the board's audit or other external monitoring advice, such as by engaging parties already chosen by the board as consultants or advisors. In fact, the independent auditing firm is not chosen by the school board. The city council and the city chooses the auditor, so there is an arm's length situation with that. Number 9, the district has a fair amount, in various times during the year, fair amount of cash in operating accounts. We just collected taxes. We do that 3 times a year. So we received about a $10 or $11 million influx of tax monies. And we have collateralization agreements with the bank, our depository, to make sure that those monies are secure, even if the bank would have difficulties. Number 10, we're asked not to endanger the organization's public image, its credibility, or its ability to accomplish its end. We are referencing as evidence here the board's stand on the mascot moniker. The board thought that was an important item to take up to create a more unified organization and to better serve its constituents, and we went ahead and did that. We issue an annual report on state assessments. That's delivered through the other paper. We provide the district website that increasingly provides more and more information to parents and the community as a whole. Number 11, we're prohibited from changing the organization's name or substantially alter its identity in the community. And I'm noting 2 pieces of evidence there where the board gave its approval of the mascot name change and for the gymnasium floor. And in as much as each one of those we believe we're in compliance, we're suggesting that the administration is in compliance with the policy in general. I am including, but I'm not gonna go through them all, many pages of backup documentation, probably too much. But I think it properly documents that the board is doing, the administration is doing a good job at protecting the district's assets.
Thanks, Joe.
So happy to take any questions on any of that.
Comments, questions? I had a couple, John, on, you had mentioned that the district took in, collected like 11 million in taxes. The city actually collects, right? And don't we get a transfer?
Yes. The city actually performs the tax collection, and then they transfer 3 times a year our share of that tax collection, and we just received that within the last few days.
Okay. And then on number 4, I just want to reiterate that there's still, there is an issue with the district's, I don't know what, if you call it the Visbit's insurance rating, that at least in one case I'm aware of, does not allow an individual board member to retain personal umbrella insurance because it doesn't meet the hurdle there. So just in terms of a unnecessary exposure, that's happens to be an issue that's come up.
Well, let me see what I can uncover about that.
Yeah. And then my last observation is, and it's not so much specific to this, but based on the documentation and supportive evidence, it would be delightful to have similar evidence on our ends metrics.
Well, you're
And I know we're working on that.
so noted.
Some of this stuff is easier to document and measure than others.
I
So,
know.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions, observations from the board?
Just a quick observation, I mean, this is the second time this came to us. It came to us back in July, and I do think that the questions that we had have been answered, so I'm good with this.
Okay. Any other comments from the public before we go through the report summary? All right. If you'll bear with me, I'll just read through these individually. The overall policy, I'll read, but we won't evaluate that till the end. Under Asset Protection 2.7, the superintendent shall not cause or allow district assets to be unprotected, inadequately maintained, or unnecessarily risked. And in the sub-policy 1, the superintendent shall not fail to insure against theft and casualty losses to at least 80% of replacement value and against liability losses to board members, staff, and the organization itself in an amount greater than the average for comparable organization. Is this a reasonable interpretation?
Yes.
Is there adequate data?
Yes.
And are we in compliance?
Yes.
Policy number 2, the superintendent shall not allow unbonded personnel access to material amounts of funds. Reasonable interpretation?
Yes.
Adequate data?
Yes.
Yes.
In compliance?
Yes.
Sub-policy 3, the superintendent shall not allow to subject facilities and equipment to improper wear and tear or insufficient maintenance. Reasonable interpretation?
Yes.
Yes.
Adequate data?
Yes.
And in compliance?
Yes.
Sub-policy 4, the superintendent shall not unnecessarily expose the organization, its board, or its staff to claims of liability. Reasonable interpretation?
Yes.
Adequate data?
Yes.
And in compliance?
Yes.
5, I won't repeat the superintendent shall not, you're probably getting sick of that, make any purchase wherein normally prudent protection has not been given against conflict of interest of over, that's A, B, of over 15,000 without having to obtain comparative prices and quality, C, of over 75,000 without a stringent method of ensuring the balance of long-term quality and cost. Orders shall not be split to avoid these criteria. Reasonable interpretation?
Yes.
Yes.
Adequate data?
Yes.
And in compliance.
Yes.
Number 6, fail to protect intellectual property, information, and files from loss or significant damage. Reasonable interpretation?
Yes.
Adequate data?
Yes.
And in compliance.
Yes.
That sounds like a prayer. Number 7, receive, process, or disperse funds under controls that are insufficient to meet the board-appointed auditor's standards. Reasonable interpretation?
Yes.
Adequate data?
Yes.
And in compliance.
Yes.
8, compromise the independence of the board's audit or other external monitoring or advice, such as by engaging parties already chosen by the board as consultants or advisors. Reasonable interpretation,
Yes.
adequate data,
Yes.
Yes.
and in compliance.
Yes.
9, invest or hold operating capital in insecure instruments, including uninsured checking accounts and bonds of less than AA rating at any time, or in non-interest-bearing accounts, except where necessary to facilitate ease in operational transactions. Reasonable interpretation,
Yes.
adequate data,
Yes.
and in compliance.
Yes.
And number 10, endanger the organization's public image, its credibility, or its ability to accomplish ends. Reasonable interpretation,
Yes.
adequate data,
Yes.
and in compliance.
Yes.
And lastly, 11, change the organization's name or substantially alter its identity in the community. Reasonable interpretation,
Yes.
adequate data,
Yes.
in compliance.
Yes.
And then the overall policy, the superintendent shall not cause or allow district assets to be unprotected, inadequately maintained, or unnecessarily risked. Reasonable interpretation,
Yes.
adequate data,
Yes.
and in compliance.
Yes.
All right, we got
Thank
through
you.
one. Want to introduce the second one?
So moving on to 2.1, this is treatment of students, parents, and guardians. Again, this is the second time that you've read through it. I'll try to do something similar to what John just did. A policy, detail policy 1 is elicit information for which there is no need. And again, provided some interpretation. Evidence here is specific to the way in which we collect data from health forms for students, to the way in which we conduct and collect information such as surveys. Detail policy 2 is fail to solicit appropriate input or obtain necessary information to fulfill the district's end policy or comply with the district's policy and limitations. And again, provided you the interpretation. Some evidence specific to this is that, again, on the ends monitoring, we have collected and continue to collect information specific to feedback around how we are doing. Again, this is an area that we know we're continuing to work on, but we do have survey data, and we'll have another survey exposure coming up the spring of 18. We use the data from the 12, 14, and 2016. Detail policy 3, use methods of collecting, reviewing, transmitting, or storing student or family information that fail to protect against improper access or material elicited. And so here again, making sure that we're following our FERPA rights, the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, that we're ensuring that we're following appropriate rules, whether that be HIPAA or other human resource related requirements. Detail policy 4, fail to operate facilities with appropriate accessibility and privacy. And we've provided some evidence specific to master planning and visioning work that we've done and the work that we've done to address some of the access related matters at all of our schools with specific noted areas from particularly those that we've most recently addressed. Detail policy 5, fail to establish students and parents and guardians a clear understanding of what may and what may not be expected from the district. Again, some evidence specific to this is certainly our handbook, some of the same things we talked about here, our district website, email, staff and teacher information, food service menus, curriculum that's available online, etc. Some examples of some of that evidence. Detail policy 6 is fail to limit the use of live security video systems to crisis situations and the immediate need of administrators for safety information or by district or building administrators to ensure student, staff, or community safety. Specific evidence is provided regarding some of our more recent events as an example of that evidence and how we access and use our security system or our video monitoring system. Detail policy 7, failed to limit the use of security video recordings to inquiries by the police, about criminal investigations. The evidence that we've provided here is specific to both dates and times of request by the police. Again, we have additional ones, but this is a place and time that we've stopped here. And so our next report obviously will pick off from where we left off in June of 17. But again, providing you some evidence and the type of request specific to that. Detail policy 8, fail to inform students and parents and guardians of this policy or provide a way to be heard for persons who believe they have not been accorded protection under this policy. We've provided some evidence specific to how we've, worked to respond to concerns when they've come forward, either by having information available on our website, how we respond to, and what some of those responses have been and how many, specific to our suggestion box, what we've had, some of the responses that we've had specific to that. The overall policy, policy wording with respect to the interactions with students, parents, and guardians, or those applying to be students and their parents or guardians, the superintendent shall not cause or allow conditions, procedures, or decisions that are inadequate, untimely, vague, undignified, or unnecessarily intrusive. And again, the evidence specific here cited is that obviously the evidence documented in detail policies 1 through 8 is also evidence to the overall policy. I've provided also some of the survey data that we've done over the last year in the report as well.
Questions or comments from the board? Martin?
Yeah, on detail policy 2, I still have an issue that I raised last time, and maybe it's not something that at this point can be resolved, and it's possible that it can't be resolved until we actually have the full monitoring of how we are doing relative to the ends. A couple issues. One is, I'm starting to question, I'm not positive about the interpretation. I know we give a lot of deference to how one interprets this, but saying that this means that you're going to get required information as it relates to the district ends policy, that is significantly weakening from the detail policy, which is saying you need to get, the administration needs to get the information necessary to fulfill the district's ends policy. And so, just the information as it might relate to it is not necessarily telling me that the administration is actually getting the information we really need to fulfill that policy. I don't know that we are or we're not. It's a little tougher because we don't have the full monitoring of how we're doing on the ends policies yet. So that's why I'm saying, I'm troubled by that now. I don't think there's like a quick fix that you can just take this back and give us more information. I don't think that in fact shows that we're complying with the spirit of what that particular detail policy is.
And I'm not disagreeing. There's, I think, more that can come along to provide additional evidence. I do, though, go back to the policy that it's, solicit appropriate. It doesn't say exhaustive. And I'm providing some just quantification.
Mm-hmm.
Solicit, you're asking me to solicit appropriate. You aren't asking me to be exhaustive in what I solicit.
True.
You're asking me to provide, to get appropriate input so I can obtain some necessary information to fulfill. So I don't think the intent of the policy was to be exhaustive. It was to be a marker of, are you soliciting information to help guide the path, which we have many other paths which we need to be compliant with. Some of you know of some of those things that are also, I think, connected to our ends, which are like our PLPs and PBGRs. So when I look at the policy, it's I can see where you're going, Martin, but it's to solicit appropriate, not all, and obtain necessary.
Well, let me make sure
So-
that I guess I'm not being as clear, is that unless we understand whether or not we're fulfilling a particular ends policy and what may be missing because, let's say we're not fulfilling a particular ends policy, one of our many listed ends that we're seeking, then the question is, well, is it in part because you're not getting the appropriate information you need necessary to fulfill that policy? The problem is that it's a chicken egg. I mean, we need to have the egg laid of the actual monitoring before we hatch the chicken of the necessary information. I don't know if that worked, but,
Yeah. I don't disagree. I just think this is, you know, whether it's me here or somebody else, I think you're asking me specific about the treatment of students and parents and guardians. So I think it's a lot about specific information and how I'm kind of gathering and or listening. It's not necessarily the specific report card, if you will, of the ends measurements that's being asked, in my interpretation, that's being asked for here. I'm not disagreeing that
yeah,
there's.
my point only is I don't know if you're complying with this, because I don't know if we're fulfilling all the ends. I don't know that means I'm not holding
Gotcha.
up this policy. And I don't know if I would,
It might be
sequencing?
appropriate just to make a note for future discussion that, if I'm paraphrasing right, Martin, it's just sort of as we more fully develop the ends, does the solicitation support?
Right, I
Yeah.
understand that.
right,
Yeah.
yeah.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, I think I can forego reading the detail policy since David went through that, but I will just say it by number. So detail policy 1, reasonable interpretation,
Yes,
adequate data,
yes,
and in compliance.
yes,
Detail policy 2, reasonable interpretation,
yes,
adequate data,
yes.
in compliance.
I would say no on all three of those, but that's fine. The board has,
All right. Detail policy 3, reasonable interpretation,
Yes,
adequate data,
yes,
and in compliance.
yes,
Detail policy 4, reasonable interpretation,
yes,
yes,
adequate data,
yes,
yes,
in compliance.
yes,
Detail policy 5, reasonable interpretation,
yes,
yes,
adequate data,
yes,
in compliance.
yes,
Detail policy 6, reasonable interpretation,
yes,
adequate data,
yes,
yes,
in compliance.
yes,
yes,
Detail policy 7, reasonable interpretation,
yes,
adequate data,
yes,
and in compliance.
yes,
And detail policy 8, reasonable interpretation,
yes,
yes,
adequate data,
yes,
in compliance.
yes,
And I will read the overall policy. 2.1, treatment of students and parents, guardians. With respect to interactions with students and parents and guardians, or those applying to be students or parents and guardians, the superintendent shall not cause or allow conditions, procedures, or decisions that are inequitable, untimely, vague, undignified, or unnecessarily intrusive. Reasonable interpretation,
yes,
adequate data,
yes,
in compliance.
yes,
All right, just a quick note on that. In that policy, we say those applying to be students or parents, guardians. I'm not sure that's adequately
We'll look at what's in the actual
Yeah, I'm
wording
not
of the
sure we're
policy. We may need to,
applying to be parents or guardians.
yeah, I agree with that.
All
It's our
right,
enrollment.
thank you.
Thanks.
All right, we'll move on to agenda item 10, update on negotiations. Board,
Should we start with staff or
start with,
start with staff?
sure.
Because it's quick. There are two negotiations that have been going on. Two contracts that expired at the end of June. One is the teacher's contract, and the other is the contract for unionized staff. Last night, we met for a while, the negotiating committee, Bridget and I, and we did come to a tentative agreement. We can't explain at this point the terms of that agreement because it's still subject to ratification by the union membership of the staff and by the board itself. And that's when those details will come out when it gets back to the board after the staff union membership has ratified it,
So ratification will show up on a future board agenda. Is that accurate?
for the board ratification, correct. Hopefully, well, probably at the latest October 4th. And if we feel there's an urgency to have it ratified, and if it's been ratified by the association, then we can perhaps think of doing a special meeting to do that, so. Cross that bridge when we get there.
All right. All right. Other board?
So the board has been receiving a lot of feedback from the community with regard to our negotiations with teachers. And specifically, we've received some statements by the SBEA and have been asked to respond to them in various ways and in various sort of from different perspectives. And so we thought we would do that tonight. And I'll start by talking about the index salary grid. The statement that we received from someone in the public that we were asked to respond to was the board has maintained a grid. However, they have not maintained the rationale or function of the grid or salary schedule. It is critical to teachers that we maintain these functions. By ensuring a predictable career path for teachers, the district has built an educational system that we can be proud of. Any changes must be both deliberate and thoughtful and agreed to by both parties. So from the district's perspective, the purpose of the salary grid is to recognize that additional experience and continuing education should help teachers improve their practice and improve student outcomes. Additional compensation for experience and continuing education should allow the district to retain high-performing teachers, and it has. While the salary index served the district and teachers well when educators were poorly compensated decades ago, the index now has serious structural flaws and has resulted in significant salary inequities among teachers that need to be addressed. School districts across Vermont are now implementing similar changes to those that the board has implemented this year to remedy these problems. Over time, the index system has created an increasing gap between the highest paid teachers and the more junior teachers. In our district, 2 teachers could be teaching identical classes in terms of the number of students and the grade level, and one could be making less than half of the salary of the other. Our junior teachers are compensated at or below the Chittenden County average, while our highest paid teachers are paid at a 6% premium to the Chittenden County average. The impact of this salary gap will be felt more keenly over the next few years as senior teachers throughout the state retire and competition for junior teachers or younger teachers increases. The board has raised this concern over several negotiating cycles, and the SBEA has refused to provide any creative solutions of its own to this problem. The most the SBEA has been willing to do in past negotiating cycles was to lower the top multiplier on the grid, which is the multiplier of what the highest salary in the grid versus the base salary, from 2.08 in 2015 to 2.068 in 2017, which had a minuscule impact on the problem. In this cycle, the SBA has offered no solutions or concessions to address this board concern. The grid still functions in the same way it always has. Teachers have been held on step for 1 year, but in future years would be expected to continue to move 1 step for each additional year of experience. Teachers still move from one column to the next as they attain additional continuing education credits. The look of the salary grid has never been sacred. Over the past 4 decades, the union has agreed to approximately a dozen modifications to the salary grid, including holding teachers on step, altering step raises, or eliminating columns, or other things that the board or the SBA has brought in the past. The second part of the statement that we were asked to respond to was that the SBA says that the functions of the index system are to ensure equity in terms of gender, ethnicity, years of service, and level of education, to provide predictability for the community, employees, and school board during the budget process, to attract and retain the best teachers for the students of South Burlington and their families. The South Burlington Index salary schedule has proven it accomplishes the above goals and has done so for over half a century. From the board's perspective, the allegations by the SBA that the employment policy that has been implemented for FY 2018 jeopardizes gender and ethnic equity, as well as seniority and education levels, are disingenuous and completely unfounded. The board remains committed to these goals. The employment policy will have no impact whatsoever in these areas. An index does not provide greater predictability for the community, employees, or the school board than a dollar system, and in fact provides less flexibility for the school board to ensure equity and pay for all teachers and set priorities in budgeting. Third, the SBA says our salary schedule has proven to be a model of how to attract and retain the very best teachers at an average and affordable price. And there are significant pressures on the district budget, both from Montpelier. The governor, as everyone knows, last year really focused on level funding and promised to bring that back as a discussion topic this year. And from the community, we face 2 budget defeats. We are working with limited resources here, and we have to determine what is fair to all, teachers, students, and the community. The SBA also says the system is not broken. It is a system which has served well this community and its high-achieving neighbors for the past 50 years. To remove it now would invite a slow erosion of the talented teachers the district has been able to attract. Under the board's imposed conditions, each individual member on the salary schedule would have to be negotiated. Put simply, there would be no incentive to stay in South Burlington. First of all, we're not doing away with the grid, as mentioned above. Second of all, the board's terms provide generous raises to all teachers. Everyone's received a raise of $1,500 to $2,000 this year, with an average of $1,679. The senior teachers have received higher raises than they would have under the fact finder's recommendations, and the board would ask how this would lead to a slow erosion of talented teachers. Finally, South Burlington's teachers benefit from the highest average salaries in the state. In addition, they work in a community with very involved parents and are provided a very high level of resources. To say that calculating the salary grid in a slightly different way for 1 year would mean that there would be no incentive to stay in South Burlington is simply not credible, and frankly, is a bit insulting to the community that supports the teachers. And I will pass it to Alex to talk about healthcare.
Sure, thank you. There has been some talk and confusion about the healthcare portion of the contract that the school board imposed. So let me address a couple of those concerns. One, the SBEA wrote, the board's proposal on healthcare is also problematic. Teachers are being asked to shoulder more of the burden in out-of-pocket costs and deductibles in the new plans. In fact, teachers are being asked to spend the same amount they spent on healthcare last year. They will bear no additional exposure or financial burden. Contrary to their claim, they are not being asked to shoulder more of the burden of out-of-pocket costs or deductibles in the new plans. Teachers will have the same access to the provider network and covered medical services. In addition, in order to move towards settlement, the board has conceded any increased contribution to healthcare with the old plans, which are in effect for the next 6 months. Another statement from the SBEA. Although premiums have gone down, teachers would be asked to pay the same amount as last year in addition to the new out-of-pocket costs. Note the word in addition to. It is true that premiums have gone down in cost. However, there are now deductibles and out-of-pocket expenses associated with the new plans, similar to health insurance plans of most people in our community. Though this statement suggests that teachers are paying additional money towards new out-of-pocket costs, they are in fact not being asked to pay more than they did last year. The district pays the balance of the teacher's premium as well as paying any out-of-pocket costs after the teachers contribute the equivalent of their average out-of-pocket copays from last year. If a teacher does not spend up to the average amount in out-of-pocket costs, the difference in his or hers is his or hers to keep. If the teacher spends over that amount, the district covers the balance and holds the teacher harmless. The board offered to keep employee contributions to healthcare flat in the second contract year. But we are, the contract we imposed was for 1 year, so I'm not going to talk about that. Let's see, we also offered to match teacher contributions to a health savings account up to the current average copay amounts for any teacher who chooses that option. Third, another SBEA quote, the South Burlington School Board put a flat number that equals 23%, deviating from the fact finder's recommendation. They have deviated again from a percentage-based cost-sharing equation to a flat number. They offer no explanation for this. This puts all risks of spiraling health insurance costs on teachers and is not the right path we should be taking on healthcare. Healthcare expenses are, okay, now it's my speaking, end quote. Healthcare expenses are paid in dollars, not percentages. The board's imposed terms and its second-year offer would have kept employee contributions stable in dollar amounts while the new healthcare plan occurs. They would remain stable pending the recommendations of the Governor's Commission on Statewide Benefits. The terms, in fact, protect teachers from all the risk of spiraling health insurance costs for this period of time. It is true, even as the state is requiring the district to reduce its healthcare spending by over $350,000 in this year alone. The terms provide transparency in benefit spending so that the community knows the amounts that the district and teachers are contributing. Further, we note that the SBEA rejected the fact finder's recommendations on healthcare, so it's unclear why the association is using them as a benchmark. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex. Other board comments?
Do we want to
Steve?
discuss the timing of the imposition?
If you'd like to.
Okay, no, I'd like to do that. And, I'd like to say, I've got some written notes, but I realize that, with the benefit of Monday's session, I'm going to leaven those with a little bit of my own comments. And I also, I do want to say candidly, I enjoyed it, and I thank the SBA for, a lot of the teachers are here tonight, and some of the faces that I was able to meet for the first time on Monday, now you're familiar to me. And I thought it was pretty informative, pretty well organized. There was a session on salary, session on healthcare, session on imposition, and then a session on, a really compelling one where Elizabeth and I spent a lot of time talking about what the teachers do. And, we do want you to know that you're valued. And I think one of you said, well, we're some of the best teachers. I said, no, you're the best teachers. That's why we're here. That's why we're all committed to this. So I want to keep that context in, just in front and center when we're talking about these things. But talking about the timing of the imposition, because, the notion that the board walked away is out there in public and certainly has been spoken of. But the board's been consistent about wanting to have a settled contract before the first day of school. And the board tried to begin discussions on health insurance back in May of 2016, and through the summer and early fall made 3 additional overtures, that's the summer and early fall of last year, additional overtures to the SBA to start negotiations as soon as possible. And the SBA did not agree to meet until November, 6 months after we started trying. The board also recommended identifying available fact finders and mediators early on in the process to assist as needed with no support from the union at that point. So basically it was fruitless in our efforts. And in the healthcare discussion, I was talking with a couple of the teachers, and they said, well, you said, when you came to us in May of 2016, you said that we'd have to reopen the contract. We liked the contract, no way, no deal. And at the time, I had forgotten to say, yes, but all of the VHI plans were changing January 1st, which there's still 6 months, basically with 6 months left on your existing contract. So doing anything about the fact that your existing healthcare plans were going away necessitated reopening the contract. So that wasn't a nefarious move. That was out of necessity from external conditions that were imposed on us. So this pattern of delay continued throughout the negotiation cycle. After 9 negotiating sessions, the board declared impasse on March 17th, 2017, and proposed that the parties mediate as soon as possible thereafter. The parties were unable to schedule a mediation until May 15th. The board sought to schedule a fact-finding session to occur concurrently with the mediation, but the SBA would not agree, and instead the fact-finding was scheduled for June 6th. The fact-finding report was issued on July 11, but the parties were unable to meet until August 3rd. You can see this is over the summer. It's difficult to get folks to the table. The earliest date that the SBA would agree to meet with the mediator following the August 3rd post-fact-finding meeting was August 21st. The board came into that meeting, I can tell you, I came into that meeting not having been part of the day-to-day negotiating team, but came into that meeting with the confidence that we might be able to reach settlement in a timely manner despite over 10 months of slow progress. It became clear, however, after 10 hours of mediation that this was not going to happen. Toward the end of the session, the board sent a clear message through the mediator that it had presented its last and final offer and asked for the SBEA's final position. Still, the SBEA negotiating team held fast to terms that were out of step with any metric one might choose to gauge serious movement towards a settlement. Some examples: the fact finder recommendations, the current increase in consumer price indices, the impositions of the Act 85 recommendations, actually Act 85 requirements imposed by the state, local budget support, again as evidenced by 2 budget defeats, and Chittenden County salaries. The SBA publicized that the board had walked out on negotiations after receiving its final offer in the apparent hope that the board would begin negotiating against itself. This tactic was not counterproductive and candidly not bargaining in good faith. And I'll just tell you, I come from a background of some experience in collective bargaining. And having sat through the 10-hour session, and I shared this with some of the folks, some of the teachers at the Monday session, I have my detailed notes of where our position was, where the SBA's position was at various times throughout the day, and the progress was microscopic. And so at some point, when you're in collective bargaining, you either know whether someone's truly there to negotiate with you, or you know that the clock's being run on you. And clearly this was the latter case. So accordingly, the board determined at this late stage that the SBA was not serious about coming to an agreement before this school year started, and the board would consider posing its last and final offer. The SBA had 8 days between the end of mediation and the board's warned meeting on August 29th to make a reasonable proposal to the board. At or before that August 29th meeting, the SBA could have provided a more reasonable proposal. It did not. The board decided that the only reasonable course to take, consistent with its fiduciary responsibilities, was to bring closure to negotiations by declaring finality and imposing fair employment terms. And then just say another thing from the session on Monday. At various times, whether it was with the public or whether it was speaking with the individual teachers, I brought up the point, and actually certain members of the public brought up the point as well. We've seen, everybody saw the fact finders report, and the fact finders report had, the SBA's position, the board's position, and then the neutral fact finders recommendation. But what the public also has the benefit of is the board's position in detail, all of the numbers, salary, healthcare, everything. And what's conspicuously absent, and has been throughout the entire process, including a number of articles in the other paper that appeal to emotion, is the absence of any documentation of what the SBA's position was that basically the board caused the board to conclude that we really don't have a negotiating partner here. We in order to move things forward in time for the start of school, in time for the cutting of that first paycheck, which basically the existing contract then becomes operative by default, and the board's basically not able to actualize its salary positions, we had to move forward. And I think that there's a reason that the negotiating team, the decision has been not to publish what the SBA's position was. And I think that's because they know that there would not be a lot of public support for that position. And I can tell you, going around the room on Monday, there were basically two responses from teachers. There were those who I understand were part of the negotiating team, and the only response was, I'm not bargaining with you, I'm not bargaining here, I'm only bargaining with the board, repeating, I'm not bargaining until I'm down with the board, because they knew that they couldn't show how far out of line their position was without losing public support. And then there were others, and again, others of you that I had very good extended conversations with who candidly told me, I don't really know what the position is. And I felt bad, because I would like to be informed. So that's where we are. That is why we are where we are. And we're going to invite the SBA one more time to publish what your final position was in mediation. And if that's not forthcoming in the next couple of days, then we, in the interest of informing the public and making sure that the public has the information that they need to understand what the board's position was and why the board acted as it did, then we're going to have to disclose that information. Does anybody have anything else to add?
No, I would just add, Steve, the comments today are intended to be informational to questions that the board has gotten either individually or collectively, inquiring about why can't you just go back to the table? And it's really to provide some clarification on the board's collective perception of where we were at in the process and what the goals were, and really what compelled the board to make a decision that it did on the 29th. You know, regardless of where you stand as a community member or a teacher, it is tough to look at the lengthy process that we have collectively been through and look at the action the board took to take virtually a lot of the articles that we had been working on for that 10-month period, take them off the table to come up with something compelling that would have resulted in a settled agreement before school started. And it's very difficult to weigh on balance, putting over $410,000 of the community's money into salaries and to preserve the contributions from last year in healthcare by the teachers, and to have offered to preserve that for over 2 years when we know there's a double-digit premium increase on the horizon, and to weigh that on balance with what the board believes is a very generous and legitimate offer that, again, took a lot of things off the table that we had been trying to make progress on, and weigh that against the potential of a work stoppage. And that is a tough situation we find ourselves in right now. And I hope some of this background wasn't so much to reflect opinions as it is to reflect the sentiments of the board and really our experience that has led up to the decision to impose terms for this 1-year period. So I'll share that. I don't know if any other board members have comments or not. Alex?
Yeah, just one comment. There was some statements that some of the teachers felt disrespected by our imposing this contract. And I want to say from a personal point of view, I have tremendous respect for the teachers of our school district. I know how hard you work. I know you're very well educated, and I look up to all of you, and there's absolutely no disrespect intended. And so that's that. That's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's true for all of us. I mean, we've had that discussion multiple times. The only other thing that I would add, Elizabeth, is that we've been very clear that we are ready to go back to the negotiating table to focus on 2019. We're starting the process for budgeting for that year, and we are open to start negotiating as soon as the SBEA is willing to negotiate with us on that year.
Just 2 points with respect, following from Bridget, that the issues that we have been hearing from the association are really these long-term concerns about what the grid is going to do and about what's going to happen in health insurance. Absolutely no reason why we can't address those and work with the association on those issues in the context of agreement for next year, for the next contract year. And finally, we did provide a letter formally to the association's lead negotiator asking to go back to the table and are still waiting a formal response from that request that we sent. So.
Yeah, and I guess I would add, too, I participated at Monday's session, and I really applaud the association's efforts to change things up a little and to inform the community of concerns. Will I say I felt the information was entirely accurate? I mean, honestly, no, but I think everyone went in there with good intentions and an effort to educate the community. I know one of the concerns that I heard was around how genuine was the board in working to get a settled contract if, in fact, we were asking to identify a fact finder early on in the process. And I understand that perception now. I will tell you that the decision on that to really request that up front was based on a couple things. One is there's very few fact finders and mediators available, one. Two, we knew all contracts were going to be opened around the state for at least healthcare discussions. So we wanted to make sure we had lined somebody up that was available. 3, our experience has been I should say my experience, and maybe Martin's as well, through at least 5 or 6 negotiation cycles, is we do get to the part of the process that requires a fact finder. And then there was a caveat on that request that if we didn't need them, if we were able to not get to impasse and didn't need the fact finding part of the state statute process, that we just wouldn't use them. And the district would have potentially made the investment to have locked in dates and maybe made a down payment just to secure that process moved along. But those were really the drivers around the board requesting that, the potential identification of an acceptable fact finder early on in the process. Anything else from the board? All right, I'll open up to, oh, go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, I want to thank John for putting together this grid. May I talk about this for a moment?
If you want to. Mhm.
Sure, thank you. There's also been some confusion about what our salary increases in the imposed contract mean. And normally, what we still do, is we have a table for teacher salaries that shows that, now if you look, you can't see it from here, but I'm going to show the general concept of a table showing a teacher's salary. Down here are the steps. It goes from 1 through 18. When you're first hired, I believe you're always on step 1. Is that
No.
correct? No? Okay.
Depends
So
what
I'm
you're
not
coming in.
right on that, but you do start at a certain step. And we have 6 columns: bachelor's, bachelor's plus 15, bachelor's degree plus 30, master's degree plus 15 credits, and master's degree plus 30 credits. And it starts in the upper left, which is the lowest salary, step 1 for a bachelor's degree. And what we normally do is, in the past, we take the bachelor's degree starting salary, and to get to every other salary in this table, and go ahead and correct me if I say something inaccurate, we multiply every other cell, as we call it, on this grid by a particular number. And what we did instead was we applied dollar amounts, and we've talked about the $2,000 amounts, the $1,700 amounts, and the $1,500 amounts. And what this table does is it shows, instead of the dollar amounts, the actual percentage salary increases for teachers in each step and education level. So this table, this grid, is staying. It's here, and if you want to take a look at it, I believe we can do that. Is that right?
It's available, it's not.
It's available.
Yeah.
We don't have, maybe we don't have copies, but thank you. So this is still here.
Yeah.
Right. Any other board comments? All right, I will open up to comments from the public.
I just want to say, I'm Noah Everett, I'm a teacher at South Burlington High School. And tonight, the teachers of Burlington, their negotiations broke down and they're going to be on strike tomorrow. It is my hope, and as I expressed to people last night, and I'm doing my best to keep my emotions in check, but I do want to say that it is very difficult to sit here and say, I really want to work with you to get a solution, and then to be called disingenuous in that. I think the people who know me, and I'm speaking just as a person, and have spoken with me, I think that they can say that I am, and I can honestly say that I think there is nothing more that teachers want than settlement. And so I respect that the experiences in negotiating sessions are very difficult. And I haven't been a negotiating teacher for South Burlington, but I worked on the team in Winooski. And I know how that can seem easy to give the other party some emotions they don't have. In this cycle, we've worked really hard to keep that out of this, and I would like that to continue.
Thanks, Noah. Yes.
My name is Lynn Vera, and I recently am a retired school counselor, 30 years in Vermont Public Schools, a resident of South Burlington for longer than that. And my concern is simply that once imposed, now we have backs against the wall. So I understand and I believe that what you all were trying to do was genuine. I went through a scale like that, a rubric like that, change in Essex when I was near the top of the scale, and we did take a big hit to make room and create equity for new teachers coming in, and it was a long process, and it was a shared process that we accepted. It was not an imposed process. It made a huge difference in morale and in going forward. So as you say, yes, we want to go back to the bargaining table. We're happy to talk about the future, as long as the contract, and I'm no lawyer, is imposed with what you've now come up with. It's never going to heal from that imposition, is my fear and my point. And you can speak to the fact that the budget went down twice. I think you all know that it was way more complicated because of the wolves and the rebels than it was about teacher salary or reimbursement. It was a crazy offshoot detour that had a lot to do with that budget. And I was as vocal as I could have been in support of you then. I'm as vocal as I can be now to say an imposition is just a kick in the knees. And it'll be very hard to recover. And I don't know if you can say imposition for 4 months because we have to start school. We have to cut paychecks. But to say imposition for the year, let's talk about next year, leaves a whole lot unsaid and unfixed, and a lot of really good people feeling kicked in the knees.
Thank you. Yeah, I would want to add, Lynn, we appreciate that the budget activity, in terms of the having to go 3 times to the community, had some initial concerns around it, and but through that process, there clearly were a lot of issues identified within the community that were budget related. And when we look at, and the board's being held accountable to it, we hear about it virtually every day. But in terms of the budget we're facing for next year, as I think Bridget said, we're getting signals on level funding. We've got this healthcare recapture. Just last week we had to add for student needs. We added an incremental head count over a contingency teacher that was approved in the budget. I think you all know who live it every day in the schools what a challenge it is to serve our students and their families. And I'm not anticipating next year's budget, not having its challenges and a robust community discussion. And we're in it right now. But thank you for those comments. Other comments? All right. Seeing none, we'll move on to agenda item 10A.
Yes, thanks, Elizabeth. So, this was added because there's a need to have whomever is going to be the proxy voters have to have submitted at least the name to the folks at either VSBA, VSBIT, and/or VHI. So there's these proxies that are required that need to be sent in. First of all, I don't know who's planning on going. This is October 20th. And
I'll be at it.
so
Are you going to be there? Are you there for VHI or?
I would be there for both, yeah.
Oh, you are going to be there?
Yeah.
So the board has a vote at for each of those. Again, I don't particularly know exactly what is being put forward, and you can talk about that more. So again, that's really my intent, is to get that clarity around voting delegation appointment.
So I am planning on going.
Okay.
I don't know if anybody else is, I assume not, because you have real jobs and real kids. So unless you want a 2-day vacation.
I
unless
feel
you-
diminished in some ways.
I'm sorry. That was terrible. And I do have a real job. It's only just very part-time. And I do have real kids.
Mine look real to me, too.
It's
Yeah.
just children who want you around. How about that? I don't have that, but you have
I don't
grandchildren that
have
want
that
you
either.
around, so yeah, you actually, so I guess I should go solo, is what it's, although you have to go there for VHI.
Put the shovel down.
I know,
Stop digging.
stop
Okay,
digging
there you go.
myself down. So I am, unless somebody is going, I'm happy to be that delegate because I don't think Elizabeth should because you'll be on the board of VHI, so you won't be able to be out in the audience to vote if there's a necessity for a vote. It is great, by the way, it is a great experience. So in the future, if you guys get a chance to go,
Well,
it is
if
good.
anybody is even able to go to part of it, you
Yeah.
could go down to some of it too.
Yeah.
It's,
You can even go during, you can go during the day, and you can find out what the things are being covered, and
Topics
it is very useful.
so if the board's comfortable, we'll delegate our voting proxy to Martin.
And,
All right.
and we're gonna put on October 4th, the resolutions, so that you guys, we can all tell me how to vote on those resolutions.
Thank you.
Yeah, and just for the board's benefit, Martin and David and I went to the regional VSBA meeting Monday, and the resolutions were reviewed, so we got a little bit of background information. Did you get extra packets?
I did, thank you for reminding me. When we go
if-
back into executive session, remind me
Okay.
again. and I-
At least you can take a look at what the resolutions were
Yeah.
as a precursor.
So we'll, Martin, we'll, on your behalf, on the board's behalf, we'll fill out and submit
Yeah,
your
please.
names for the organizations.
Good.
with Both VHI Visbit and the SBA. Okay.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to agenda item 11, setting the agenda for the October 4th meeting.
Look, can I ask one quick question? So, Visbit as well has a meeting?
Yeah, I think it's probably intertwined, but this is the,
That's the one that's like 7 o'clock in the morning on Friday. Do I have to
No.
go to that one
I don't-
too?
and again.
I don't think you have a vote at that one.
Oh, I don't have to vote at that
I don't
one.
think so.
But this is, again,
Okay, no, that's good, that's good.
this is for them as
All right,
well.
all right,
And
that's
again, I don't particularly know what the items are that
Yeah,
are being.
I'll see what
yeah.
it is. I'm happy to cover it.
So we can add resolutions, VSBA resolutions
right.
to this agenda.
Mhm.
What other topics? Should we add support staff ratification?
Oh, yes. Mhm.
Yes, if not earlier, yes.
Any other agenda items on this, David?
No, we can take 2-1 under 9 off,
Okay.
because we've done that tonight.
The state reported, had their SBAC release, press release, so as part of David's report, we can do an
Will
SBAC
they be,
report.
they're embargoed until when?
No, they're done.
They're done
I have
now?
them, and we haven't been through all the spreadsheets
I
to know
know,
what
it's
all
very
the
immense.
comparisons are, but by the next board meeting, we can certainly have it.
So SBAC
As part of
assessment.
your report, David.
I don't know if we want any more detail on master plan and visioning. We did talk about tonight that we may need board approval that night for the firm that we're going with for the structural assessment of the middle school and the high school. So we have responses to those RFPs that we need to get through, and then David's made a recommendation, and so that would probably be the night where we would decide on that.
So maybe we should change that to, we
Could be
need
action.
just action, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bridget.
How close are we to kind of board guidance on budget from a timing standpoint?
I think it needs to get out. I think it would be good if we could do it here. I'm just not ready. I haven't really sat with the administrators. John and I haven't had a chance to put our heads together, but
Okay.
if not, I think it's got to be done the next October meeting.
Okay.
So,
It might be helpful if you and
Can
John
just-
can give some thought to the Citizens Advisory
Yeah.
Group as well,
yeah,
and maybe get
some ideas out for
some ideas out ahead
at
of
least
time.
to solicit,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, we can, let's put budget planning or something. This update.
Anything else for October 4th? All right, moving on to agenda item 12, future agenda items. Any
I don't
comments?
know if you want to revisit some of what you heard that you guys just talked about around the engaging communication enhancement or whatever, if that could
Mm.
just maybe that could be put as a future agenda item, strengthening our social media arm or putting information in the back of our agendas.
Mhm.
I don't know. I know you had good conversation about it, so I don't.
Yeah, if we can capture some of that, and we
Yeah.
can just finalize.
I did get a text from the live feed on Facebook urging me to get a Twitter feed. I'm gonna decline.
Is that from Ann?
No, it wasn't from Ann, it was from another person in the neighborhood there.
All right. Agenda item 13, consider the minutes of the meeting of September 6. Any comments or changes? All right, seeing none, those are approved. Agenda item 14, the consent agenda. Do you want to just
Sure, you
talk
have in
about
your
these two?
packet too, folks that are in your packet somewhere. The hiring information specific to Catherine Carver and Emily Gilmore. Speech and language, this is one that we've been working to fill.
Mhm.
This is a fill as well as the Emily Gilmore at the high school. So both are coming to us with some positive experience, and we're excited about having them on our faculty.
Great. And that does not require action, correct?
Nope.
Okay. All right, moving on to 15, the executing the lease documents. This needs some action.
Yeah, we approved the purchase of various pieces of equipment, in a couple of different meetings through the summer, and the approval of the particular lease company back in July, subject to the legal review of the actual lease document. So we finally had the attorneys settle their differences on the lease document a week or two ago, and the lease is available to be actually signed by the superintendent, and that should be authorized by the school board. I do have a copy of the lease if anybody wants to look through it. It's like a half an inch thick. But we would like to just authorize David to sign it and send that off to the leasing company.
So do I have a motion to authorize the superintendent to sign the lease documents as approved previously?
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Thank you.
Motion passes. Agenda item 16, AP Order 9. Any questions? All right, agenda item 17, we have 2 AP order checks to Millbrook Building and to Nagley and Chase. The first in the amount of $68,211.62 to Millbrook Building, and the second of $182,135 to Nagley and Chase.
Both of these are for work being completed at the high school. Negley and Chase has been doing the windows over there, and Millbrook has been doing the handicap accessible restrooms. Both of those projects are complete, but for punch list items and payment of the final retainage. So we're getting to the end on both of these, and they went very well.
Do I have a motion to approve the 2 AP order checks as discussed?
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The motion passes.
May I ask a question?
Mhm.
Back on the new hire report. It's dangerous when I get these things. So I compared the first teacher's salary with the grid, and it's less than what is on our grid. Is that because the teacher has not started or started late in the year?
Might be a partial.
Partial.
impact.
I don't
It's
know.
a one,
Part of it's proration, Alex, so.
Proration?
Because of the timing because we're into the full year.
Right.
What you're seeing is full year,
yes,
and so when somebody starts 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks
Right.
later.
That's
we
what I was
prorate them
wondering.
based on
Yeah.
189 days.
yep, okay, thank you.
Good question.
Okay, so if I'll do this correctly, I will take a motion to go into executive session for purposes of discussing labor negotiations with teachers and support staff, where premature general public knowledge would place the board at a substantial disadvantage.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Executive session.
And then we have to come back out here. Come out, okay.
Come back here.